Right. So if you are looking in the book, it's page 68. You're all the way at the bottom of the page.
Page 68.
68, all the way at the bottom of the page. And I want to ask you a question. When a flight attendant comes over to you, are they really smiling?
No.
So there's this concept called the flight attendant smile. And during COVID, when everybody was wearing face masks, it became immediately apparent who was really smiling and who was not really smiling. And it's not just about the flight attendants, but everybody. Do you smile with your eyes or do you just smile with your mouth? So the flight attendant smile is just basically, that kind of thing. Whereas a genuine smile goes all the way up to your eyes. Your eyes smile as well. Now, we're not really in the business over here of assessing the integrity of flight attendants. The reason I'm asking the question is essentially to get to a different question. Now let's take this. Obviously, it's safe. When we're talking about flight attendants, we can afford to make fun of them because nobody has a flight attendant, so we can make fun of them. But here's where it gets a little bit closer to home. When your child says please because you told them to say please, okay? So is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? Is it something that we should encourage? Is it something that we should be suspicious of? Ultimately, if my child is being polite because I reminded them to be polite, have they really learned how to be polite? Now, the truth of the matter is this is not even a question about our children, because you could debate the value of what we're instilling in our children. Let's make this much more personal. Much more personal. When you ask somebody, how are you? How frequently are you asking that question because you have a genuine interest in how they are? And how often are you asking that question because it is the correct thing to do? That's how we've been taught. We appreciate it when people ask us how we're doing, so therefore we extend it to other people. In other words, is it honest? Is it robotic? Does it have a value? What happens if somebody asks you, how are you? And then they don't even wait to hear the response. So is that valuable at all? Was there any point? Was there any upside to asking you how you are if they don't even wait to hear the answer? Now, really where I'm going with this is, how important is it to do the right thing genuinely versus how important is it to do the right thing? And maybe an angle on this question is, should I not do the right thing until such time as I'm ready to do it authentically? Can you imagine? Imagine if people didn't do the right thing because they were afraid of not being authentic. Well, here's another example, right? Two kids are having a fight. So what does the parent say afterwards? Say sorry. So when the child says sorry, does the child feel sorry? Or is the child saying sorry because there was pressure from the parent that the child should say sorry? And if the only reason that they're saying sorry is because there's pressure from the parent, is that really valuable for the child to have said sorry? And we could keep doing this. We could keep doing this with dozens of examples which essentially boil down to the same question. Is there value in doing the right thing even if I don't have motivation to do it for the right reasons? Is there value in doing something kind even if I don't feel kind? Is there value? Oh, here's an example that everybody can relate to. You ready for this? Here's the example. So, a woman loves flowers. This is not every woman necessarily. Don't worry, I'm not generalizing. I'm talking about a specific woman in this case who loves flowers. And she happens to be married to a man who cannot for the life of him understand the value of flowers. Makes no sense. There's no great return on investment. They only last, depending on the weather, for a week, maybe 2 weeks. Why would you give somebody a gift that is dying? Right? They have a whole lot of reasons why they don't believe that flowers are necessarily a good thing. So now the husband gives his wife flowers. Comes Friday, he walks in, he's got this beautiful bouquet. He went to the florist, bought the beautiful bouquet, gives his wife the flowers. And not only does he give her the flowers, he says, "This is for you, my dear, I love you." Now, here's the question. Here's the
What
question.
did he do wrong?
The question is that valuable if he doesn't actually feel that flowers are an expression of love? So is it valuable? She's told him that she likes flowers, so therefore he wants to illustrate to her that he's listening and that he cares about the things that she cares about and whatever. Therefore he's giving her flowers. But he personally does not associate the emotion of love with flowers. Is it valuable to give flowers as a token of love if a person doesn't feel love through the gesture of giving flowers?
From a woman perspective, yes.
Okay, so from the recipient's perspective, but you haven't answered the question. Because if the woman is happy to receive flowers, that still doesn't tell us that there's value in him doing something as an expression of love if he doesn't feel the love. You're saying she appreciates receiving the flowers.
But it is an expression of love.
No, it could be an expression of duty,
Okay, I'm not going to argue there.
right?
But that's just as much. It's an expression of duty. But if
Okay, so you're saying the main thing is he's taking her into consideration, and that's what counts. That's beautiful. It's not what I'm asking. See, if he takes her into consideration and therefore he brings her the flowers, that doesn't mean that it's love. That could just mean he's being pragmatic. He's being pragmatic. Oh, so Gary is saying that his thoughts and feelings will follow even if it is insincere initially. I'd love to say that that is the case. However, I'm familiar on a personal level with men. I won't say many men. I'm familiar with men who have been doing the flower ritual for their wives for many years, and it still hasn't rubbed off on them as something that they actually feel is an expression of love. It's much more, listen, it beats the alternative, you know? Like this, I don't have to hear about so-and-so buys his wife flowers, so I've done that, I've checked that box, I bought her the flowers, and there we go. You know, gesundheit, let her have the flowers. So that's really the question. Is that the question we have to focus on tonight? No, it's not the question we have to focus on tonight, but it is a question that speaks very much to where we are in our exploration of Tanya, because we're analyzing an individual who has done a lot of spiritual work and has really, really pushed themselves spiritually to a whole different level, a level that none of us really could truly relate to. We can read about it in a book, but it's very difficult for us to really resonate with this level. So what this person has achieved, we call a Beinoni. A Beinoni means somebody who is so connected and so aligned with what Hashem wants that they behave in line with what Hashem says. They say only things that Hashem would approve of. They only think along lines that Hashem would be happy with. It's a highly, highly advanced personality. Now, there's a big difference between a Beinoni and a Tzaddik. And in fact, there are many differences, and we've identified some of those differences. One of the big differences between the Beinoni and a Tzaddik is that the Tzaddik genuinely feels the connection, whereas the Beinoni honors the connection. And there's a big difference.
Beinoni is on a duty.
It doesn't necessarily have to be duty. It doesn't have to be duty. But the Beinoni could even experience love, as we've already started to discuss. But the Beinoni does not have an experience in the same way as the Tzaddik has an experience. What does that mean? So here's two ways to, or let's start with one way. Maybe we'll look at two ways to look at it. You know, when Hashem gave the Jewish people the Torah, everybody gets very excited about the fact that we said, Naaseh v'nishma. We're in. We're going to do this. We're completely dedicated. Whatever you want. You know, Hashem, boots and all, we're there. Everybody's very excited about this. However, the Gemara puts a little bit of a twist on that tale. Because the Gemara says that Hashem came to the Jewish people, yanked Mount Sinai out of the ground, suspended it over their heads, and said, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, this will be your collective tombstone. And then everybody said, Naaseh v'nishma, we'll do whatever you say. Okay, so is that authentic or is that not authentic? That sounds like the husband who buys flowers for his wife for his own safety. Right? And in fact, the Gemara goes further to say, Mikan, when you have that information, then you realize Moida'a Rabba Le'oiraisa, that there is a massive excuse we could all use when we don't fulfill the Torah in the way that we're supposed to, because we'll say, you know what, you twisted our arm. It's not like we wanted this. We were forced into it. Now I have a question for you. Number one, do you honestly believe that Hashem pulled Sinai out of the ground and hung it over the Jews? I know the Torah is full, or at least the Talmud is full, and the Midrashim particularly, of these strange stories of things that are very difficult to wrap your head around. But do you honestly think that Hashem dangled a mountain over their heads? Do you honestly think that Hashem threatened us and that's why we accepted the Torah? Like, really? Now here we are, we make such a big deal, Nasev and Nishma, that we were so dedicated. Where's the dedication? So let's take a different perspective. We know that mountains are used metaphorically throughout the Torah. Often we see things about mountains. In fact, the fact that the Torah was given on a mountain is already symbolic in its own right, but there are various symbolisms of mountains that we come across again and again and again throughout the Torah. And one of the things about a mountain is that a mountain is a metaphor for love. Now, how do you get from a mountain to love? Yes, maybe some romantic guy is going to tell his wife, I'd climb the highest mountains for you. You know, maybe what he meant is to get away from, I don't know, but what's the association between a mountain and love? Fascinating. There's a fascinating insight from the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, where he says, if you understand the geology of a mountain, you can understand the symbolism of a mountain. How do mountains form? There are two possible ways that mountains form. Either you've got pressure from what we call tectonic plates, so you've got different parts of the Earth's mantle that push up against each other, and one gets forced above the other, and that's how you get a mountain range. Or you've got lava under the Earth's surface that gets forced up through a fissure in the Earth's surface, and that forms a mountain, volcanic mountains. Whichever way you look at it, a mountain is formed out of pressure that pushes from the bottom upwards. And that is a symbol of love. Love is a pressure that pushes me upwards towards something greater than myself, somebody outside of myself. That's what love is. So love and mountains are associated with each other. When the Gemara tells us that Hashem dangled Mount Sinai over the Jewish people and kind of forced us to accept the Torah, it doesn't mean that he literally dangled the mountain over our heads. It means that Hashem exposed himself. We know that at Mount Sinai, the Jewish people saw Hashem. It was a very powerful, overwhelming experience. Now I want to ask you, if Hashem knocked on your door, and you open the door, and there's God himself standing at your door, and he says, I would like you to undertake a particular mission. You would also say Naaseh v'nishma. You'd be so blown away by the experience. You'd be so caught up in the excitement of, oh my gosh, Hashem is personally coming to me and giving me an opportunity. Of course I'm in. I'd be so overwhelmed. So that's what happened at the time of the giving of the Torah. Anybody can have that kind of an experience, and anybody can have the experience of what follows afterwards. Few weeks later, the same people who were so blown away by this overwhelming sense of divine revelation made a golden calf. Because love is not the mark of absolute dedication to Hashem. So can a Beinoni have love? Yes. Not only duty, love of Hashem. But it comes and goes. So the Beinoni has, and we've learned this already in previous chapters, in the process of davening, where the Beinoni is being very meditative and completely focused on Hashem's greatness, they are at the highest level of love of Hashem. And then davening ends and they settle back down into routine. Now they have a very healthy routine. Their routine is a routine of doing the right things all the time and avoiding the wrong things, which is great. But if they were at tzaddik, then they'd have that consistent sense of love of Hashem all the time. So that's what we've already touched on so far. Then, in this chapter, we said, Klal Gadol beBeinoni, that one of the fundamental principles of how a Beinoni should operate and grow and develop is that they have to constantly spend time contemplating on Hashem's greatness, because the more real Hashem becomes in our lives, the the more likely it is that we'll have a passionate drive towards Hashem, that we'll feel that love towards Hashem. That was the first premise of this chapter. Last week, we started by saying, and what if you don't have the capacity for that? What if you can't focus? What if you don't have the time? What if you're not an intellectual? What if you don't, you're not able to contemplate for long periods? In other words, what happens when you can't really feel the love of giving a bunch of flowers? Should you still give the flowers? What happens when your smile is not genuine? Should you still smile? Now, of course, we live in a society that says fake it till you make it. But that is a very, very superficial insight. And we're looking for something considerably deeper than that, which is where we're going to go today. So if you're looking in the book on page 68, second last line on the page, and the word we're starting with is vegam. See that? Okay, so that's where we're going to start. Vegam. Sorry, I'm wrong. We're not starting the word vegam. We're starting before that. I'm sorry, because we just did that little note last week. So actually, we're at the part that is just after that little note. So after that little star. Do you see that little star? So that's actually where we're starting, just after that little star. Dahainu, what that means is, Shehalev mevin beruach chochma ubina shebamoichai gedula sein soif baruch hu de kula kamei kala chashiv mamash. Okay. So where are we starting? We're starting by describing the fact, and we touched on this briefly last week, and now we're going to have to unpack it further, that there are two variations on a theme. The theme is love. Now, love is one of many emotions. Typically, in all Jewish mystical texts, when we speak about our relationship with Hashem, we focus a lot on love, because that's really the underpinning of all meaningful relationship with Hashem. If you have love towards somebody, you want to do the things that they expect and the things that they value. So if you love Hashem, you want to do what Hashem wants and what Hashem values. So that's why we align love very much as the core of our relationship with Hashem. So now, in order for love to happen, I know that there are some very romantic people around. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody around the table, but there are very romantic people around who believe in the concept of love at first sight. Right? We can debate this, whether it is a real thing or not. But one thing is for sure. 90% of people, it's not love at first sight. Right? 90% of people, there's maybe a shtickle interest, there's a little bit of attraction. Love develops over time. I heard a really beautiful thought yesterday that somebody shared. In the brachos that we say under the chuppah, we speak about the fact that the couple should be blessed with ahava, achva, shalom, v'reus. Ahava is love, achva is brotherhood, shalom is peace, and reus is like kinship. Or friendship. So this is what all the four, he says it's 4 levels of the maturing of a relationship. So I'm not going to go into the 4 now. This is not a marriage and relationship share. We can park this for another opportunity when we do the marriage share. But the point that's very important is Judaism recognizes that there are stages of the development of love, the deepening of love. And what's interesting about those stages is that some of them are completely counterintuitive. Meaning, when a person has an immature love, they believe that the love is because that person does so much for me. And I don't mean that they do your laundry. So, does so much for me. Like you often hear people say in their wedding speeches, and generally speaking, you should avoid being at my table during wedding speeches, because I'm a little bit cynical sometimes of wedding speeches. I think Hilton's the only person who has heard more wedding speeches than I am, and he has them on record. So, which means he could use it as leverage against the people who made those speeches. Very often you hear people in wedding speeches say this: "You complete me." Right? Which, by the way, if you translate that in Google Translate, it translates into "I'm finished." You complete me, right? Now, when you hear somebody say that at a wedding, "You complete me," it sounds so beautiful. Ah, You know, can hear the organ playing in the background, the harps and the violins. It's an incredibly selfish statement. You complete me. That's it. Your value is what you complete me. This is why we're getting into this marriage, because of what you do for me. Should be the exact opposite. Should be that a person gets up and says, I am so excited to bring you value. You complete me. It's all about me. So as a person, some of the growth and maturity of love is counterintuitive. You start off believing that love is that you love somebody else for what they bring to you. Then you grow up a little bit, have a few more years of marriage, and you discover all the fine print. The things they didn't tell you. They didn't tell you that this was part of the package deal, right?
Tell me now.
I can't until you know who the person is. Different fine print for each person, right? And by the way, the fine print runs into paragraphs and chapters. It's not just like a one-liner disclaimer, T's and C's apply. Suddenly you discover all these things. And exactly what a couple believed when they were engaged were the endearing elements of the other person are exactly what becomes the bane of your life. Exactly. Oh, I love the way you did that. I wish you would just stop doing that, right? It's exactly what happens. So what's the counterintuitive part of the deepening of love? This is what this guy was saying is called reus, is realizing, so it's a process that requires intellectual investment, realizing that difference and those annoying elements of the other person are the best thing about our relationship. Hard to get to that point, right? What is the best thing about what I enjoy being annoyed? What do you want, some kind of a masochist, No, because that's what's going to push me to learn new ways of looking at life, to learn patience, tolerance, whatever it is. It's that aspect of the person that brings out the best in me. You can't get there through emotion. It's an intellectual process. The person has to think about it. They have to think, why is it that Hashem decided that this person who I love so much has to come with these issues? Once a person works through it, then you have a deeper love. So that's what we're telling the Benoni. Originally we said the ultimate experience of a Benoni is to have love. How do you have love? Through an intellectual process. Now what happens if you don't get to the point where that intellectual appreciation actually translates into love? Let me tell you what that means very practically. Very practically. Yeah. Do you ever hear about the husband who's falling asleep and the wife says, close the window, it's cold outside? And he says, and if I close the window, it'll be warm outside. Yeah? So, in every relationship, but I don't care about anything else. There are millions and millions of things that could be the issues between couples, but the thermostat is for sure one. People who marry each other are they come with a different thermostat. Mm-hmm. That's how it is. They'll never be on the same page climate-wise. Never. Right? So it's always this battle, heat on, off, aircon, yes, no, window open, closed, whatever the case, It's this ongoing. So the guy goes for counseling. Right? So I don't know what to do. He goes for counseling. I don't know what to do. My wife, it's in winter, she wants the heat like this. In summer, she wants the aircon like that. I don't know I can't live like this anymore. So what's the therapist going to say? We'll move into another room. What's the therapist going to say? So whatever advice the therapist gives, what has to lie at the core of that advice is you have to acknowledge that different people regulate temperature in different ways. And so therefore you have to respect the fact that she's not trying to make your life miserable. This is not malicious. It's not against you. It's not because she wants you to suffocate. It's not because she wants you to freeze, as the case may be, right? The differences. So the guy comes home, and he's done a lot of work now with the therapist. He comes, he realizes my wife is not trying to kill me, right? So the fact that she's blasting the aircon at 18 degrees when it's a snow warning outside, It's not because she wants to kill me. She literally regulates temperature differently. So he accepts it. I want to ask you. He accepts it completely. He has no issue, no hang-ups, no resentment, nothing. I want to ask you a simple question. Does he still shiver? I don't care what therapist you go to. You still shiver. Meaning to say, it is possible for a person to get their head right and still live with the same problem. This is the second experience of the Beinoni that we're describing. The first experience of the Beinoni is where he goes through such a deep contemplation about Hashem that he actually feels love. It's not a flight attendant smile. It's genuine love towards Hashem. But that is a unique, elite group of people. Forget about us. Even in the world of the Beinoni, who is such a spiritually advanced person, there are plenty Beinonim who still, with all the stuff being right in their head, still don't feel it. And if that's true for a Beinoni, how much more so for us? How often do we get frustrated because we acknowledge a concept and we buy into the concept and we believe the concept and we still just don't feel it? And then we think, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And one of the most valuable things in life is to be able to tell the difference between whether our experience is normal or our experience is problematic. Because if a person has a normal experience and they think it's problematic, they could become depressed or at the very least demotivated. And if a person has an experience that is problematic and they think it's normal, they could be destructive, delusional. So one of the most important things in life is to be able to learn what is normal and what is problematic. And by the way, if you go back to relationships, that's exactly the point. So often people are afraid that what's going on in their relationship is problematic, that they don't discuss it with anybody who can guide them to know that it's normal. And likewise, unfortunately, sometimes people do things that are problematic in a relationship and they convince themselves that it's normal and they destroy everything. So in our relationship with Hashem, we have to be able to know what is problematic and what is normal. If I spend time, and I'm not a Beinoni, and I don't spend nearly as much time as the Beinoni in the first part of this chapter contemplating Hashem's greatness. I don't. Occasionally I come to a Tanya shir. We talk a little bit about Hashem. I daven, I think a little bit about Hashem. It's Yom Kippur and I get completely enraptured by Hashem. But the rest of the time, I'm trying to earn a living. I'm trying to keep my family sane. I'm trying to go find a place that actually has water, as the case may be, right? Is it normal under those circumstances not to feel a palpitating love towards Hashem? Yes, that's normal. It would be delusional to think that I am going to have this burning passion for Hashem that's going to override my life and I'll feel like I have Hashem dangling a mountain over me, that I'm completely ready to do whatever he says. That would not be normal. That's delusional. So is it problematic that I don't feel that love of Hashem? No, it is not problematic. It's normal. The next concept that the Beinoni should know, and what he calls the second klal godel, the second fundamental principle of a Beinoni, is my heart might not be beating with that excitement, but I have to get my head right. If my head's not right, that's problematic. Get that? If my heart is not right, that's normal. If my head is not right, that's problematic and I need to work on it. So let's go back. Let's use a few examples.
Can I ask, does that mean that you should follow your head and not your heart?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay, so let's use a few examples. So the guy who's been giving his wife flowers every Friday for 40 years still does not get a flutter in his heart when he gives her those flowers, because flowers don't talk to him. Is that normal or problematic?
Normal.
It's normal. But if after 40 years he can't get it into his head that this is something my wife appreciates and therefore it is valuable for me to do it, that's problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so valuable to be able to distinguish between what is a normal state where maybe my heart's not, and a problematic state where my mind doesn't appreciate that not everybody feels the same as I. So if my feeling is one way, it doesn't mean it's not valid for somebody else. Let's go back. If a person says, I don't really feel like I care how you are, is that normal? It's normal, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it's normal. It's normal. Not everybody cares how everybody else is. It's normal. Is it ideal? It's not ideal.
To express it or to think?
No, to think it.
I know.
I'm saying to think it. Like at the end of the day, when I say to somebody, how are you? For me not to feel like, oh my gosh, I hope you're okay. It's normal. If you're somebody who's very close to me, then obviously I care. But if I in my head think there is no need to ask somebody how they are, that's not normal. That's problematic. The person says, I don't feel the need to say thank you. Okay, maybe you don't feel it. Listen, it's not a great thing. It's not a great thing. But if you think because of that you don't have to say thank you, that's problematic. So right across human experience, we can identify the difference between what is right to accept in my mind, even if I'm not feeling it yet in my heart. And some of those things are more urgent to learn how to feel than others. Again, if I never feel the love of flowers, that's okay as long as I appreciate that it's meaningful to my wife. If I don't panic about how are you before I ask you how are you, that's okay. As long as I take the moment to ask how are you. And I'm a little bit authentic. So in the same way, the Beinoni has two possible experiences. There's the experience of feeling this burning love towards Hashem, which is usually reserved for a tzaddik. But the Beinoni has that experience from time to time, specifically through davening. So if I don't feel that burning love all the time, that's normal. But my head should say the most valuable thing to love is God. That is where I have to get my head to. I'm going to put it slightly differently. There was once a Farbrengen, and one of the Hasidim, this was back in Russia, it was difficult times. One of the Hasidim had a few l'chaims, and he got up on the table in the middle of the Farbrengen, and he said, "Was seinen mir? What are we?" So he said, "What? We're going to claim that we're Hasidim? We haven't even scratched the surface of being Hasidim. We certainly can't claim to be Hasidim." That was his big announcement. He sat down. They continued the Farbrengen. After a period of time, half hour, whatever it was, the same guy gets up, bangs on the table. He says, "But what? Are we not Hasidim? Are we not? God forbid! How could you say we're not Hasidim?" And he sat down, they carried on the Farbrengen. And about an hour later, he jumps up again, bangs on the table, and he says, "Aber wir wollen sein Hasidim." Maybe we're not Hasidim, but we aspire to become Hasidim. It's not good enough for a person to say, "This is me, take it or leave it." It's just unfortunate. I'm not a sensitive person. I'm not an emotional person. Or in our context, because that's what we're talking about, I don't feel love of God. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. You have to have an aspiration. Wir wollen sein Hasidim. Or in this context, we wish to have a love for Hashem. It's got to be clear in our brains that that is the ideal. The ideal is to be a person who lives with passion for Torah, for mitzvahs, for God. That's the ideal. If I'm not there, at least my brain should acknowledge that's the priority. That's the ideal. That's the goal. So let's continue reading. We're going to go back to the part straight after the star. Dahainu, in other words, Shehalev Mavin. That we're talking over here about a person whose heart understands. It's an interesting expression. And the intention of heart understanding is that we don't just understand as some disembodied, calculated, cold intellectual. We understand in a way that's personal, that's meaningful for us, because that's what happens when you invoke the heart, and it becomes personal. The person understands with the spirit of wisdom and of understanding that is within the brain. Gedulas ein soif baruch hu. We're talking about somebody over here who understands, at least to some extent, the infinite greatness of Hashem. The chulokamei kaloch shiv mamish. That compared to Hashem, everything is like absolute nothing. In other words, nothing has value except Hashem. I have to know that. My brain has to comprehend that. Asher al kain, and therefore, because I recognize that there's nothing besides Hashem, yo'asol lo yisborech, therefore what is befitting for Hashem is shetichle elov nefesh kol chai lidovek ulihikolel be'oroi. Therefore, what is appropriate is that every living thing should experience what we call over here, he used the words kolois. It's actually an expression we use, kolois nefesh. What does that mean? My brain has to process and understand and appreciate the idea that the most valuable thing that could ever happen in life is that we would disappear. Okay? So don't try this at home. But that should be our aspiration. What does it mean to disappear? Well, what's their value in disappearing? I mean,
Which word means?
He says, "Lios kalois elov," that they should be. Oh, sorry. So shetichle elov kalos we still get into. Shetichle elov nefesh kol chai. Shetichle elov nefesh kol chai. That the soul of every living thing should completely. If you want the how do they translate it in English? The word is usually to expire. Here they say to cleave. It's a little bit more politically correct, right? Well, what does it mean? It means this. Imagine for one moment, or let's put it a little differently. Every one of us thinks we're really important, right? I mean, we don't walk around saying it, but we really think we're important.
100%.
Right? Exactly. And the times that we're most convinced that we're important are times like when the guy in front of us is on his phone and the light turns green and now he doesn't go and I'm going to be late. So at that moment I think I'm more important than that guy. So it's worth it to scream, shout, hoot at him, do whatever I've got to do because I'm that important. Or an alternative is when you're standing in line at the checkout and somebody comes along and they've got fewer items than you and they ask, can I just go in front of you?
I don't even let them ask, I let them go.
Oh, you see? So,
because my trolley is usually like that.
Right? But that's a moment where a person thinks, I'm important, etc., etc. I don't have to convince you. There are dozens of opportunities a day to feel like we're really important. Now, realistically, there are very, very few people on this planet who share that sense of our importance. It's usually a family and a few friends, and the family sometimes not so much. 99% of the population not only doesn't think we're important, they have no idea that we exist. No idea whatsoever. So what, we're such big deals now, we're walking down the street, look at me, I'm so important, step aside. People don't know who we are. They have absolutely no idea who we are. And that's just human to human. So can you imagine now from Hashem's perspective? Hashem is infinite. How much do you think we register on the value of everything that exists in the eyes of infinite God? There's nothing to discuss. Except there's one little twist to the tail. We have a neshama. And the neshama is not part of this earth. It's not part of this universe. It's an alien. It doesn't come from here. It doesn't belong here. The neshama is a piece of Hashem. So I'm going to rephrase the question. How important is my neshama? It's a different question, right? When I say, how important am I? How important is my neshama, which is a piece of Hashem? Not very. Absolutely. It's not on a scale of importance. It is absolutely important. So now the question is, am I my neshama or am I me? When I walk down the street, am I living as my neshama or am I living as me? With all the other layers of stuff. I'll put it differently. On my social media, is it me or is it my neshama?
It's you.
That's being represented, right? That's complicated. Right? When I secure a business deal, is that a feather in my cap, or was it an expression of my neshama?
It's a partnership.
Does it feel like a partnership, or is it just a nice thing to say?
I would say it's a partnership.
I know
Whether
we'd
you
say
know-
that. That's
Whether
what I'm
you
saying.
know it or not, it is still a
Okay,
partnership.
hang on a second. So if that business deal meant that somebody else lost out income because of my business deal, is that a partnership with my neshama?
It's Hashem's accountancy.
You've got to be really careful when you say that kind of thing, right?
You've listened.
No.
So Tichle Elav Haruach means that if you really spend some time thinking about Hashem and Hashem's greatness and appreciating the neshama, then all you want is to be able to plug into the neshama and all the external should disappear. Now, this is not, like I said, don't try this at home. It's not something we're supposed to do. There were people in history, Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, they meddled with this idea and they blew their souls out. And that's, that was the end of them.
Their bodies,
Their souls.
Is that possible?
That's what happened. Their souls blew out of their bodies. That's what happened to them.
But then the
So-
soul still exists on a
No, that's the point. The soul disappears. It's like taking a candle and putting it next to a bonfire. Then the bonfire is going to overwhelm the candle. It's the ois candle. You become part of the bigger whole. So in our heads, even if this is not how we live in practice, in our heads we should have that consciousness. Tichle elav haruach. Is that the expression used? Tichle elav nefesh kol chai. Tichle elav nefesh kol chai. That every living being should want nothing else but to be reabsorbed into the greater whole where I don't have a distinct identity because I'm part of the greater whole. That's what we should. Now, do we feel this? No. Should we have awareness of it? Absolutely. That's where that our heads should accept that reality. That the ideal state would be to be reincorporated back into infinite God instead of having to live, in the here and now.
Problem is we are living a spirit, our souls are living a physical world for a reason.
That's not an argument. This is what my mind should see as a value. Do I still shiver? I still shiver, even though the therapist told me that my wife doesn't have bad intentions. I still shiver. Do I still live in this world? I still live in this world. But my brain has to be aware. My brain has to focus on what the ultimate aspiration is. The ultimate aspiration is to become one with Hashem. So the Beinoni, who's not yet at the point where they have this overwhelming love of Hashem, should at the very least be at the point that recognizes that's the value. The value is to wish to be one with Hashem. The value is to wish to have that kind of love that makes you feel like you want to escape your body and just connect to Hashem. That's where the mind should be. And so we didn't get to the next part, which is, and when that happens, then you start to realize, oh my gosh, maybe I'm actually stuck and trapped in the body, and then what I do with that. But we'll still talk about that next time, please God.